Advocates and experts say efforts to stamp out sexual violence in the Australian Defence Force are welcome, but well overdue. Sexual offences in the military will be targeted by a new inquiry and mandatory discharges for those convicted, all part of the government's response to the Royal Commission into Defence and Veteran Suicide.
The government will accept most of the Royal Commission's recommendations, with the opposition saying they'll work with them to respond. We'll hear from the Minister for Veterans Affairs later this morning, but first to political reporter Tom Lowry at Parliament House. Tom, good morning. So talk us through it. How exactly has the government responded to these findings?
Yeah, good morning, Emma. This Royal Commission looked at this issue of suicide among veterans and serving ADF members for 3 years. Came back with 122 different recommendations. Most of them have now been accepted by the federal government. Just to lay out the scale of the challenge here, between 1985 and 2021, more than 2,000 serving members or veterans took their own lives. And the Royal Commission found that itself is likely quite an underestimate. It is probably a much larger challenge even than that. The Royal Commission wound up focusing quite a bit on this issue of sexual violence within the military and the problems that it causes. It came back with two specific recommendations on that front. One is a new formal inquiry looking specifically at this issue, but also a policy of essentially immediate dismissal from the ADF for those convicted of sexual offences. That recommendation has been taken up by the federal government. They say that is the right approach that should be taken here, though it may take legislation to put it into place. Advocates say the ADF has been saying for some time that it has a policy of zero tolerance when it comes to issues like sexual violence, but they say taking this step of immediate dismissal would be a big step towards actually implementing that zero tolerance policy.
Tom, one of the key recommendations, though, has been rejected. Can you explain that for us?
Yeah, Emma, this is quite an interesting issue. So the Royal Commission recommended changing a rule that treats veterans differently if they've been injured in training as opposed to in combat. Those injured in combat receive higher compensation for their injuries ongoing as well. So this has been a point of tension in the military for some time. There are really strongly held views on both sides of this argument as to whether veterans should be treated differently depending on where their injuries occurred, the context of their injuries. The Royal Commission came back saying that this rule should be scrapped, that veterans should be treated the same regardless of where they were injured. But the government recognised that there are those strongly held views on both sides of this argument and have decided to keep the status quo for now. OK, Tom Lowry, and as we mentioned, we'll speak to the Minister shortly. Thank you.
In breaking news overnight, the man accused of Melbourne's Easey Street murders in the 1970s is on his way back to Australia after he was extradited from Rome. Our Europe correspondent Zoe Ford has more.
Perry Karumbalis was escorted by Victoria police officers onto a Qatar Airways flight from Rome's main airport after his extradition was approved by an Italian judge. It is important to note that at this stage, the Greek-Australian national has not been charged with any crime, and his lawyer has told the ABC that he says he's innocent. He'll be interviewed by Victoria Police for the first time after the long journey to Melbourne. Karumbalis is wanted in connection with the gruesome murders of Suzanne Armstrong and Susan Bartlett almost 5 decades ago in 1977. The women, who were in their 20s at the time, were stabbed to death in their Collingwood home, and Ms Armstrong's 16-month-old son was found alone in his cot after the attack. Karumbalis had been living in Greece since 2016 but was detained on an Interpol red notice when he travelled to Rome in September. Now, Victoria Police had been watching him for years, but he couldn't be extradited due to Greece's statute of limitations, which says that charges have to be laid within 20 years of an alleged offence, and that law doesn't exist in Italy, which is how Rome became an option. After Karumbalis's arrest, he was then kept in a notoriously overcrowded maximum security prison in the heart of Rome until his extradition today. The 65-year-old's lawyer told the ABC that her client was surprised when he was detained, but that he has been cooperating with authorities every step of the way and intends to clear his name.
Zoe Ford there. Back home, a suspected gunman remains on the loose today, more than 24 hours after fatally shooting two people south of Melbourne. The crime has shocked local residents in the quiet community on the Mornington Peninsula as police urgently try to identify the attacker. Mietta Adams joins us. Mietta, good morning. What can you tell us about this ongoing investigation today?
Well, good morning, Michael. The clock is ticking. This morning, police remain very concerned that the suspected gunman is still on the loose. It comes more than 24 hours after two people were found dead with gunshot wounds on the Mornington Peninsula in Rye. Now, what we know is that one of those people was a 29-year-old man who was known to police. He lived at the Parsons Street address. The other person who died was a woman, but she is yet to be formally identified by police at this stage. Now, it's still very early stages in this investigation, but what we know is that the woman and the suspected gunman entered the premises, that there was an altercation and that gunshots were fired, and then eventually the gunman fled the scene. By the time 000 was called and that emergency services arrived at the address, the woman and the 29-year-old man were unable to be revived. Police say that this was a targeted incident and that one or more firearms could still be outstanding in the community.
And what has been the reaction in the community?
Well, understandably, a lot of people are feeling some fear at the moment. This is quite uncharacteristic, as some neighbours say. They say it's a very quiet beachside town where it's going to be packing out, and as hundreds flock to that area over the coming weeks as summer holidays kick in. But police are trying to assure people that because the three parties were known to each other, that there should be no danger to people who live in the area. But they say that they're treating this matter with a lot of urgency to try and apprehend the gunman. They also said they're exploring multiple avenues of inquiry. One of those includes seeing if drugs may be involved. But at this stage, police are really relying on the public's help to get them those answers in this inquiry. They're appealing for any CCTV, dash cam or witness accounts of anything that could help them find answers in this complex investigation.
Yes, investigation continuing. Mietta, thank you.
In other news, Woolworths says the sight of bare shelves in some of its Victorian stores will continue amid an unresolved industrial dispute involving warehouse workers. About 200 workers picketed outside a distribution centre in Melbourne's southeast, with the supermarket giant saying it created an unsafe work environment. A spokesperson for the United Workers Union says they've made good progress in their negotiations over pay and conditions, but there's still a long way to go.
The four people accused of murdering Perth schoolboy Cassius Turvey have formally entered pleas of not guilty in Western Australia's Supreme Court. The First Nations boy died in hospital 10 days after he's alleged to have been assaulted with a metal pole, causing widespread outrage and leading to vigils around the country. The trial is scheduled to begin on February the 10th next year.
The head of Parliament's powerful Intelligence and Security Committee says democracies must act together to deter China from invading Taiwan. At an event for Taiwan's de facto Australian embassy, Labor Senator Ralph Ciccone praised ties between Canberra and Taipei, saying Australia and its allies have a role to play in helping to maintain the peace.
Sydney's new intercity passenger trains will today begin operating on the Newcastle and Central Coast lines. The train sat unused for 4 years due to safety concerns raised by unions. There'll be 600 new double-decker carriages.
A Coalition MP has sparked a strong backlash over comments made during a debate over gender equity targets for businesses. Colin Boyce said men working in construction can't be compared to women working in childcare. Comments Minister for Women Katie Gallagher described as outdated and casual misogyny. In a statement, Mr Boyce told the ABC that women and men should be paid the same for the same work, and that he sought to raise concerns about the reporting of gender pay gap across different industries.
And I have absolutely no qualms about women wanting to do anything they like, and in fact they should be paid equally as men are. But the simple fact of the matter is that what we miss here is that we are not comparing apples with apples. Many women don't want to be CEOs of companies or take leadership roles.
Longtime Neighbours star Ian Smith has revealed a terminal cancer diagnosis. The Australian actor shared the heartbreaking news while also announcing he'd be stepping away from his role on the show. The fan favourite has played Harold Bishop on the long-running soap opera since way back in 1987.
Okay, let's take a quick look at global markets now. Futures are pointing upwards. The Dow Jones has recovered some of the losses when the markets opened this morning. It's down just over 0.15%. The Australian dollar is now buying 64.7 US cents.
Now, most of us have seen a double rainbow, but have you ever seen a rainbow streaked by lightning? Well, that is exactly what has happened in the skies over Wagga Wagga following recent storm activity in New South Wales. Climatologists say it is very lucky to see both the short-lived phenomena at once.